So, uh, before we maybe do the other thought that I kind of mentioned a little bit on to whet your appetite, without saying too much, I do want to look at one thing. So,
Okay.
actually, probably better go here, because I was thinking about this week some, and it has to do with the sacrament. And so, since we just blessed it, it's probably a good time. Okay.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And so, if
You got this
like,
tab on have this tab on Gematria. That's awesome.
wait, sorry, what?
Yeah, I just see you have a tab on Gematria.
Oh, yeah. Anyways,
Anyway,
yeah,
that's just squirrel. I'm sorry.
yeah. I have tabs on a lot of things, and some of them, if I was really worried about it, I would go update them because some of it was, notes and thoughts of how I was before, where I'm not there now. But this,
Right.
I give it out so people can go look at it. I don't think too many do because it's on my. I give a link to it on my resource page.
Yeah.
I know some people have gone through and looked at it, but at the same time, even though I give it out, it'd probably be hard because you have to know what keywords to look for, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Anyways, so one thing I've always wondered about, because D&C 89 says sacraments, plural, right? Since
Right.
we're talking about it, I'm gonna put it in to make it obvious. And it's not the only one that makes it plural.
Right.
This one's plural.
It's
Which
59. It's full
59, which has,
plurality.
guess what? That's the one on the Lord's Day, the Sabbath, right? Um,
Full of pluralities.
right. And so I've always, what are the sacraments? And I've always kind of like, because people list things off, right? Because the Catholics
Mhm.
list 8. I've looked at them like one's marriage, birth, death, baptism, communion, and things of that nature. And I'm not too impressed with those lists, to be honest. But,
Mhm.
and I've looked at the dictionary before, and it just never really clicked. And maybe partly because of the discussion last week, I went to the dictionary again, and that really stuck out.
Oh yes.
A ceremony producing an obligation, which that is what we typically call the sacrament, but it's not
Yeah.
the only sacrament, right? Baptism's a sacrament
Right.
because it's a witness of an oath, aka covenant, because oath and covenant is the same thing.
Yeah.
And I see that in the Book of Mormon. They use the words oath and covenant interchangeably in the Book of Mormon.
Mhm.
If you want, I might have scriptures on that. I can't remember if but anyways, I can do it with my tool if we
Oh,
want.
and then there's this one down here is really cool. To
The
bind by
obligation,
sacrament.
or
Down here, verb transitive. Bind by an oath, all the way down at the bottom of sacrament.
yeah, this one, right? And that's what the covenant is. And the what we typically call sacrament in the Restoration, that's, if you go look at the prayers, it is, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
But so is baptism
Mhm.
or any type of oath. And so to me, the answer to this is what are the sacraments? It's when you make the covenant with Yahweh. That's what it is. And
Ah.
there's multiple ways to do that.
So
The two,
so the Sabbath is for entering into covenant. That makes sense, actually.
right. And so along these lines, since we talked about rebaptism a little before recording, I don't think it needs to be, but right now, and with this little study I did on it throughout this last week,
Mhm.
I think the best day to do that is on a Sabbath. I don't think it needs to be, but if you could pick a day,
Every
that's
baptism I've ever done has been on a Sabbath.
well, that's because of the LDS traditions. My rebaptisms weren't on Sunday, which is what most
Well,
people do.
yeah, well, yeah, they've been on the wrong Sabbath, but yeah, they've been on a Sabbath.
Well, the rebaptisms I've done, I don't think they were done on a lunar Sabbath. Didn't worry about it at that. I mean, doing it at that time.
Yeah, my last rebaptism, I wasn't worried about it at that point. It wasn't even on my radar.
Sure, sure. My first one, it definitely wasn't. My second one, it was, but um, but I didn't worry about it. But looking at these scriptures, right? Let's go look at them. Can you read it since I'm eating too?
Yep. That thou mayest more fully keep thyself unspotted from the world, thou shalt go up to the house of prayer and offer up thy sacraments, oaths, covenants upon my holy day.
Which that is Sabbath, right?
Yep.
No, I'm not saying that it has to be that day, but I think that's showing a preference to have it done on that day.
Well, I think that it's more effective on, I think it would be more effective on that day, just based on the idea that on the Sabbath, the gateway to heaven is open. As
Sure, sure.
per,
This is a appointed time, but
yeah,
at the same time, in Acts, I forget the names, but the one that was reading Isaiah on a chariot, and then one of the apostles came by and then explained it to him, and then they
yes,
got
yes.
baptized. I don't
Philip
think
and
that was on a
yes.
Sabbath, so I don't think it has to be.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, Philip and the eunuch. I'm just thinking that it would be a really effective time to do it
right.
because
I completely agree.
on the Sabbath, you can, as per my presentation on the thing, on the Sabbath, you can approach the throne of God with confidence if you are obeying his law.
Right. So to go along with this, like, because the part of baptism, right, is witnessing that you've repented of your sins. Now look at this, 59:12. That's part of that process. Confessing thy
Confessing thy
sins unto
sins
the
unto thy
Lord.
brethren and before the Lord.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
showing that you've repented to the church, right?
So are we
Okay.
talking about like public confession?
Uh, so personally, at this point, I would say no. And I would use
That's
the
my thought.
example of Alma the Younger. It's to the people that you've sinned to or against.
That's my thoughts on that. I don't believe that's about public confession.
Right.
It's not about standing up. It's not about grandstanding on your sins. It's about um,
Going and saying sorry to those that you've sinned against and doing what you can to fix it.
yeah.
I don't think it's like going out with the public and saying I've done this. Now, I do think it's okay if someone you didn't sin against, but they need some help in repenting themselves on something that you've done yourself. I think it's fine to bring up your repentance that you've done on something to help
Right.
someone bring them to repentance. But I don't think it's something you just go out and broadcasting to everybody.
Well, yeah.
Whatnot. But if occasion comes up where it would help someone, I think it's appropriate to bring it up.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Um, so anyways, but that, because that's part of the big covenant that most people know about, or witness of the covenant of baptism. That's part of it, right?
Yes.
In fact, Moroni 6 brings it out. I think Mosiah 18,
Mhm.
and there's another one, 3 Nephi. I'm thinking 18, but I don't think that's it. I think there's somewhere else. My memory's a little vague on that one. But anyways,
Well, I know that 18 is one of the chapters where people are getting baptized.
Mosiah 18, 3 Nephi 18 is more sacrament, though. But
Yeah,
it
but
relays.
right at the very beginning, there's baptism and people getting baptized with fire and the Holy Ghost.
I don't
Chapter
remember
8.
that part, but I don't want to sidetrack on that right now.
Yeah, no,
Um,
that's neither here nor there.
right.
Not right now.
Anyways, but the big thing is D&C 59 is about the Sabbath, right?
Mhm.
And I think I've told you this, it was given on a lunar Sabbath. It's on my Sabbath page. In fact, maybe since I'm just saying it, I'll show it real quick.
Yep.
Let's get it ready, because I have a little picture. I should probably replace the old picture that I have there with a picture from my app instead of someone else's app.
That might help.
I like my app more. Of course I will.
Well, I found it to be wholly reliable.
Yeah, and yeah, I think there's multiple things. So it's more accurate because this one goes by 29.5 days
Yeah.
for the lunar cycle, where mine actually does the 29.2 to 29.9. It's just most people do 29.5 because the math is easier. YX plus B,
Yeah.
right?
Why math? Why math?
Oh, well, anyways. But the other thing I like about mine is it has both calendars. It shows dates for both calendars, the Gregorian and the lunar solar.
Yeah. Well, and
For-
the really cool thing here that I see is the lunar Sabbath followed by the new moon day.
yeah.
That's a really significant day for a revelation of that nature.
Oh, sure. I can see that because they're both the Lord's day, right?
Yeah.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. Okay. Well, unless you want to say some more on that one.
No,
Actually,
I think that's something. I think we can just leave that with people to mull over.
sure. And it's interesting. So in definition 2, there's oaths and obligations, but I mean that one's probably pretty easy to see. But I went and got the dictionary of obligations. Hi Charles, we're recording. But here it kind of brings in the same thing about it being an oath, just saying it a different way, right? The binding power of a vow. A vow is an oath, it's a promise, and this is how you bind to it. An oath or contract. The binding source is civility, kindness, gratitude. By act of which a person becomes bound to do something to or for another, forbear. In fact, this to me somewhat reminds me of the Ten Commandments to take his name upon us, because that's kind of the binding power of it.
Oh.
So I'm going to pause for a minute. So to start off, do you have a specific question that you want to ask on it, or should Ben and I just kind of go off, because we're both on the same page on the calendar?
Yeah, what I want to know is for someone who is a rookie, is there a simplified, it could be a very complicated matter trying to figure out what isn't the accurate calendar, what is the correct calendar to use if you're trying to follow Old Testament appointed times, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And so is there more something more reliable and something that a layperson can understand?
Sure.
My
So unless Ben has something that pops in his head, I think a very important thing that I see that can help people grasp, but the Julian and Gregorian calendar is not Yahweh's calendar, is the fact that in the scriptures there's 3 types of days versus on the Julian and Gregorian calendar there's only 2 types of days. And so we could start there, unless Ben has a thought pop into his head.
That's a good place to start.
Yeah. So let's go. So this is my calendar tab. Hopefully I'm sharing my OneNote, right? I have a lot on this. It's been an important subject for me. And I actually was working on updating my app for it some today also, because I have an Android app for it, it's a little slow at startup, and I fixed that, and I was doing some other little improvements that I hope to push so people can have the faster apps. Probably I'll have it done in a week, and maybe it'll then be pushed to the people in a week after that. So maybe about 2 weeks. But anyways, but a big thing is there's 3 types of days in the scriptures. There's work days, and then there's the Sabbath. And so those are 2 that we have on the Gregorian calendar, right? Some people call it weekend and work days, but it's basically work days and Sabbath, okay? Because 6 days of work and then the Sabbath. Now, the third type that most people don't know about, or even if they do, they just kind of push it off to the side, or they don't take it real seriously, is New Moon Day. And this is like a big deal. In fact, Isaiah 66 is about the coming kingdom. It's prophecy, okay? It's about the millennium. And you'll see this in other verses, and we can look at where it talks about it, even just during normal times. It's not just prophecy, but some people will claim, well, that's for the past. But here's Isaiah 66. In fact, this is an interesting verse because SDAs, Seventh-day Advents, they'll use this verse, but not completely. And I'll show you the part. I'll just read it, and then we can talk about it, okay? Isaiah 66:23. And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another. What? No, I have them on my help here, okay? And okay, sorry about that. And from one Sabbath to another shall all flesh come to worship me, saith Yahweh. So, did you catch? There's 2 different types of days in that verse. There is Sabbath, and that's what the SDAs love to focus on. The part they will try to get you to
They don't know what to do with it. They don't know
they
what
don't
to
know
do.
what to do with it. Is new moon to another. So this is New Moon Day, and so this is the King James translation. And we could go look at on Bible Hub if you want, but I would say a better translation is from one new moon day to another, and from one Sabbath to another, all flesh shall come and worship me, saith Yahweh. So no matter what you think new moon is here, if we start getting into more calendar issues, I think you'll start to agree that it's a better translation would be New Moon Day than new moon. But we'll just start with that for now. But here we see 2 types of regular worships, okay? Weekly Sabbath and New Moon Day. On the Gregorian calendar, there is nothing for New Moon Day. Nothing. It's just a normal day that just happens to happen, right? Now, interestingly, the Julian calendar's gone through multiple changes, okay? The first one to know about is it used to be an 8-day week and not a 7-day week. And during Yeshua's mortal ministry, the Julian calendar that Rome used was an 8-day week. In fact, I think...
Yeah, there's several pictures.
Yeah,
Show that.
I might have that picture on this resource page. If not, I'll get it from my memes.
Right. That's not it.
No, that's okay. So those are ones about how days started differently, but let me go get the one that shows the 8 days. But I do have articles on that resource page. I'll give you the link to it. That will talk about the 8 days. But let me get the picture, and then I'll share it. Share screen. let me zoom in. So this is Julian calendar that was found during archaeology. Now, if you look hard enough, you'll see 8 days. So there's A, B, C, F, G, H. That's 8 days, right? And that is the calendar that was being used by Rome during Yeshua's mortal ministry.
Mhm.
8-day calendar. Now, let's go to that resource page. Oh, and before, oops, wrong screen, silly me. The Julian calendar, around 200 BC, 200 to 300 BC, if I remember correctly, stopped going by the moon. So they used to do their months by the moon, but around 200 or 300 BC, they stopped doing that. I forget. Also, they used to have non-count months. I forget the date range for that. And this is where the pontiff, the head politician, and I'm emphasizing pontiffs on purpose, would use those non-count months to stay in power longer. And so later in history, I forget which pontiff changed this to where they got rid of that and they just added 2 months to the calendar, so that way the pontiffs wouldn't have that power of control. In fact, one time those non-count months lasted.
It was Julius Caesar who actually corrected the calendar. That's why that's why it became referred to as the Julian calendar.
Oh, okay. But well, it still had problems because Gregorian, the Pope Gregorian, he fixed it more because they're going off of the solar instead of the lunar solar, and it had problems. In fact, just FYI, if you think Yahweh's calendar needs to be fixed by men, you have a problem with your calendar. Because if you go look at these calendar histories, just the Gregorian calendar, right, from Julian to Gregorian, that was done to fix the calendar because the seasons were changing with they weren't staying constant with the calendar, and that's why they changed it. And so did God forget about that? I don't think so. But with the way that it's set up in the scriptures to do it, where they have leap moons, it never had that problem. It's just sadly the Jews stopped completely following it. They kind of did and they kind of didn't, because the Catholic popes forced the Jews to start adopting the Gregorian calendar or die by the sword. So instead of standing up for truth, they decided to give in. And I have quotes for that. But anyways, oh yeah, I was going to show the resource page that even will show the current calendar. So I think it was around 200 AD. They went from 8-day week to a 7-day week. And I have two pictures from archaeology. This is from a Roman bathhouse where it shows the calendar. And if you look, the sickle, that is Saturday. The week used to start with Saturday. So if the continuous 7-day cycle is true, which it's not,
you'll not find any scriptural reference.
Right, and you'll actually, I can show you scriptural references where that's not the case, but people will claim that, but they can't show it from anything. They have nothing to show that there's a continuous 7-day count to Adam. Nowhere. They just claim it without any proof. They just say it because they need to say it to keep the count. In fact, on that point, if you want, I have articles in here and videos talking about issues that have happened with the international dateline, when that date line has moved multiple times for the convenience of money, SDAs then have fights about, oh, should we have it on Sunday or Saturday now? Because do you keep the count or you do what's on the wall? So even in today's modern society, there is no continuous 7-day count, because there have been multiple countries around the international date line that's not true. You can look in fairly recent history, like 50 years and maybe even less than that they've had problems. But anyways, I don't know the date range for those off the top of my head.
So is the divine calendar, is it a 7-day week like it's in the fourth commandment? 6 days?
Yeah, it's a 7-day week. I'll show that. In fact, I was working on my app, and so I have it up. So I'll show my app real quick. So I have two main modes in my app. The Gregorian mode, because that's what everybody's used to. And I have two numbers on here. I have the Gregorian date, and then I have the lunar solar date, the small number. Or for this view or talk, I'm going to go, there we go. I'm going to go to the lunar solar mode. And so you'll see here, you'll see the 3 types of days. You have the work week, okay? The first work day of the moon is the second. It's always the second, because the other type of day is new moon day. And you'll have that always the first of the moon. And then because of the lunar cycle variation that we have that started around 700 BC, which I have resources on that if you want to get into that issue. Sometimes there's a 30th and sometimes there's only 29, okay? And the reason I believe it's not shorter is so that way we'd have the 4 Sabbaths. So Yahweh made sure it didn't get any more modified than that. So that way we'd have the 4 Sabbaths, because he's in control, right? He allows things to happen, but he only allows things to happen so far, right? Just like Job is an example of that. And Satan had to get permission from Yahweh on what he could do to Job. God's Elohim's ultimately in control. But anyways, so every month or moon, because these used to be called moons, and it got shortened to months because the calendars all up till about 700 BC were based upon the moon. It was constant because that's what Noah had and that's what they taught, and they're like, why would we do anything different? But anyways, so here's your 3 types of days. Your new moon days, which is the 1st and the 30th, when there is a 30th. Your work days, 2 through 7, 9 through 14, 16 through 21, 23 through 28. Those are all 6 days, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, wait, I have those numbers 1 through 6 at the top. Anyways, I'm being a little facetious. And then the 7th day, the Sabbath. So yes, the calendar has 6 working days and then a Sabbath. Now, an interesting tidbit here, in the 10 Commandments, the 4th commandment, it never says how many days your rest will be. It just states you work 6 days and then you rest. And because sometimes, most of the time, you will rest 1 day. Sometimes you will rest 2 days in today's lunar cycle, and sometimes you will rest 3 days. And I worship on all 3. I host these on New Moon Day, so the 1st. I don't host them on Transition Day. It's a little much, but anyway. Well, it's a little much for my family. It's more what it is. So I'm trying to do a balancing act with my family and hosting these things with other people, right? But anyways, so there's your 3 types of days on my calendar, and I can show this from the scriptures also. I don't know if Ben wants to interject a little bit, because
yeah, actually, there's a very clear reference in Ezekiel chapter 46, verses 1 and 3, which talks about the 3 types of days.
So I'm gonna get the mean one because I think the mean one that I have is a little more poignant on this. I think you know which one mean one it is because it's
Yep.
It just it makes it more visual, right?
Mhm.
So there you go.
Yeah. Thus saith the Lord God, and starting in verse 1, thus saith the Lord God, the gate of the inner court that looketh toward the east shall be shut the 6 working days. But on the Sabbath, date, the second kind of day, it shall be opened. And in the day of the new moon, the third kind of day, it shall be opened. Like in verse 3, likewise the people of the land shall worship at the door of this gate before the Lord in the Sabbaths and in the new moons. The new moons and Sabbaths are all
They're non-work
They're
days
worship
and
days.
worship days. They're both.
They're worship days. The gate and the gates of heaven are open to us, and and if we are keeping the law of the Lord, we may approach his throne in confidence on the Sabbaths and new moon days.
So to go with this verse, I'm going to ask you, Charles, a trick question. Okay. There's no answer for it. So I'm just being honest to you, but I'm going to ask it anyways. If new moon day was on a Tuesday, should the gate be opened or closed? On the Gregorian calendar, that's a trick question. There is no real answer. Where on the lunar solar calendar with three types of days, there is an answer, right? As we're seeing right here.
And it's given in Ezekiel 46, verse 1.
Yep. So there it shows the 3 types of days right there in one verse. Back here, let me show so that way you can, because I have, that's a key verse, right? Those 2. So hopefully those are big enough for you to read. If you're worried, I like using Bible Hub if you want to look to some of these words, if you want to get into depth, but I think it's pretty clear, but I'm happy to go in more depth on these first if you want to. Do you want to say something, Charles?
Well, this is all new to me, and I got my family, stuff's going around me as you talk.
Okay.
But I got the key verses and the resource link to the calendar, and I followed as close as I could the calendar that you shared. So I want to investigate that further.
Sure.
That's kind of
So
where I'm at.
I'll give you a link to do you have an Android?
My wife we have one Android in the house. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good. I'll give you a link to my app for this, which I hope you'll like and use.
So does your app show when it's an extra, like lunar, like sometimes the lunars are one day, sometimes they're multiple. Does it show the multiple?
It shows that, and that's why I say new moon days and transition days. And in fact,
yeah, so that's for the dummy. Like we could just now, does that correlate to the sky? The sky? So
yeah.
I could just look up in the sky and see a new moon and know.
Well, on my new moon resource page,
You
I
can
go
look
by
up the
dark
sky on
conjunction.
New Moon Day,
If
you'll
you
see
go by
nothing.
first sliver, you'll run into cases where your first sliver to first sliver is more than 30 days.
So the whole thing is that when you look up at the sky on new moon day, you'll see no moon.
Yeah, it's a dark conjunction is what it should be. I know people fight over this because there's a lot of calendar wars out there.
There's room unless you have a means of calculating, if you just go like visually, superficially, you could accumulate error in that.
Correct. So on my new moon page, I talk about how to figure out the new moon and how I believe the priests did it. And I have 2 links that talk about that technique.
Does this also help determine High holy days,
Correct.
like,
The high holidays are
Absolutely.
based off of the moon. And those,
yeah,
so on
like
that point, since you're bringing it up, I'll say a little bit and we can get more into that or go stay on the calendar, but there's 3 types of Sabbaths. There's the weekly Sabbath, which is what most people think of. There's
Mhm.
the moonly Sabbath, which is today, today's new moon day. And then there's the yearly Sabbaths, which most people call high holidays, but they're an annual Sabbath, yearly Sabbath. So there's 3 types of Sabbaths. And if you look on my Sabbath page, I'll give you the link. Oops, change my keyboard. I talk about the 3 different types in there. And also, I picked some of my favorite verses, but there's others where it doesn't say my Sabbath is between me and you, meaning there'd only be one type. But like Exodus 31, it says my Sabbaths, plural, are between me, assigned between me and you, meaning there. And I take this to mean, and I think if you study out the scriptures more, you would go along with me, hopefully, that there's 3 types of Sabbaths. That's why it's plural there. It's because there's multiple types. Where, like Isaiah 66 we read, it's singular, even though it's the weekly, because it's talking about one type of Sabbath with that one. Well, actually, there's 2 Sabbaths here, the new moon day and the weekly Sabbath. But it's listing each one out individually, and that's why it's not going plural. It's doing singular.
Right.
So this one here, Amos 8:5, which is a good one that since we're here, we'll just read it. Because it's another one that really specifies the 3rd type of day in the calendar. It's a big one, and it shows that it's a non-working day also. Because the only people that I know that take new moon day completely seriously, other than maybe there are some Hebrew rooters out there that will do a fireside on new moon day, but they'll still work on new moon day. The only ones that take new moon day seriously, completely, as the scriptures state, especially this one that I was showing you, are Lunarsabitorians. Because we know we're not supposed to work on that day. And here it is, and this is where it states it. Amos 8:5, saying, when will the new moon day be gone, that we may sell corn? Look at this. So these are the wicked, or those who are focused on money, saying, we don't want new moon days so that we can sell. Showing that you can't buy or sell on new moon day, according to the scriptures. And the weekly Sabbath, because everybody will agree that the scriptures state you can't buy or sell on the weekly Sabbath, although most believers, supposed believers, will do that, right? They'll buy and sell on the weekly Sabbath, but most of them know that the scriptures actually say not to do that. That we may set forth wheat, making the ephah small and the shekel great, falsifying the balance of deceit. So this last part is saying that they want to cheat the people. They want to sell and make money, and they want to cheat the people to do it. They want to get rich off of the expense of other people.
But they can't do that on new moon or Sabbath.
Right, because they're both non-work days. And Isaiah 66 brings out how they're both worship days. Anyways, but here's where I talk about the lunar cycle a little bit, and I have a resource page for that gets in more details. In fact, when it happened goes along with the creation prophecy. If you want to get into that issue. Now, if I could remember what, okay, there it is. So that gets into that issue because it used to be 30. During Noah's day, The lunar cycle was a constant 30 days all the time. Something changed, and it happened in 700 BC. And I have resources for you to go look into it if you want to get deep into this issue.
And
It's
there's
there
evidence,
historically.
and there's evidence that there were 2 new moon days during the time of David.
Yeah. Do you want to do that one since you're bringing it up? I think that one's 2 Kings, or is that one Samuel? I think it's hard to remember everything perfectly.
Yeah.
That's why you have notes. Right? That one 2 Kings. Oh no, 2 Kings is a different one. It's just this 1 Samuel 21.
Yep.
And here's
That's
some
where I
quotes
was going. That's
okay.
where I was going. Okay. Let's see. 1 Samuel 21. No.
Well,
Verse 6.
right off, I have key verses is 5, 18, and 24. It's been a little while since I've reviewed it, but those are some key ones that I have in my notes.
I think that would be, yes, First Samuel chapter 20, verses 5, 18. Yeah. And David said unto Jonathan, behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I should not fail to sit with the king at meat. But let me go, that I may
that's
hide
where-
myself in the field on the 3rd day at even. And Jonathan said to David, tomorrow is the new moon, and thou shalt be missed, because thy seat will be empty. And David hid himself in the field. When the new moon was come, the king sat him down to eat meat. Now the thing is if you read through all of chapter 20, you see that this is something that happens over a period of 2 whole days. 2 whole days, David is not available for the feast of the new moon at Saul's court.
Because he was worried about what Saul was going to do to him, right?
Yeah.
And he was expected to be there because these are worship days, and you were supposed to go worship.
Yeah. This is a subsidiary point that up until some point in the reign of the kings of Israel, it was just a straight 30-day month, basically.
Yeah. So just since you're bringing that a little bit, we can go look at my resource page. I have verses there that's just real convenient of that change because it's in the scriptures. So Isaiah 38, 4 through 8, 2 Kings 20, 8 through 11, 2 Chronicles 32, 31, Daniel 2, 21, talks about it. Because
in the creation prophecy,
referring to it.
And in the creation prophecy, the 4th day.
So do you know what the creation prophecy is, Charles? Before I go down that rabbit hole too much.
I'm not familiar.
Okay. So everybody knows about the creation history, the first 6 days, right? Now, when you go look at that, those different days follow the pattern of history of these 6,000 years that we've been here, okay? And it's interesting that in the 4th day, the moon was appointed, not created. That's another issue to talk about, but it was appointed on the 4th day for the Moedim, for the appointed times, right? Now it's interesting that 700 BC was during the 4th millennium, aka the 4th day. And so up to that point, you could just simply count 1 through 30, 1 through 30, 1 through 30, and know where you are in the calendar. But in the 4th day, the millennium that the moon was appointed for the Moedim is when the moon cycle changed to make it so you have to go by the moon rather than do a constant 30-day count. So that's just real kind of overview. Another time we can get into the actual some details of the creation prophecy. Because I have a unfinished post where I bring out a lot of that out that we could go look at if you want to get into that another time. But these are verses that shows what it happens. In fact, the shadow of the sundial went backwards. So the shadow of the degrees, but anyways, which is part of the reason that I say the day starts at sunrise, because sunrise is when you will get shadows on a sundial. And if you want, because a lot of people who are Lunarsabitorians will say twilight, and I completely disagree with that. And
There's no shadows. I mean, there are shadows at twilight, but I don't know how.
not
what-
distinguishable ones, because at
Right.
twilight it's basically midnight. Okay, and I've
Exactly.
done videos and recorded this, and I get into this with this video that I'm going to give you, but here's my morning resource page.
Mhm.
And so one reason to get my app is I have all these resource pages in the links section of the app. So it's just a quick reference, but in this recording, I talk about twilight versus sunrise. And there's no way to determine twilight without computer math calculations. And I don't believe that's how they did it. They did it by sight. And you can, although there's light before sunrise, the light that you get after sunrise is direct light, and it's a lot brighter. And in fact, in one of the videos that you'll see that I recorded with my GoPro, in that recording that I did in that presentation someone asked me to do, I would see if I could distinguish my shadows from my foot. You couldn't. Now, if I moved my foot, you could see that there was a little change. But if I kept my foot still, you could not distinguish where the shadow was, if that makes sense. And it's because it's no direct sunlight. It's scattered light that's bouncing all over the place, making it so there's no shadow. So anyways, there's a lot of calendar wars out there, or portions to the calendar war. But I sidetracked us off of the new moon day, which is the third type of day that's in the scriptures. And I
have
think
a
that,
question.
sorry, go ahead.
So if someone is calculating the day from twilight versus morning, does it throw the system off?
Yeah, well,
Everyone I know, most of the people I know who are seventh day are, the 24-hour day for them starts on the evening.
evening, right. And
So
this is a whole nother issue.
How that turns out.
And yeah, it will change the day because, so here's a little thing that I have on my Sabbath page that kind of explains this. The day starts at sunrise. The moon starts the sunrise after the dark conjunction. The year starts the month after the spring equinox. So I've written code for all this. And when you change the day, start of the day from sunrise to sunset, or astronomical dawn, which a lot of people in the Lunar Sabbath community uses because of World's Last Chance does with their app. A lot of people are getting it wrong. And because the day starts sunrise, or the new moon day starts to sunrise after the dark conjunction, depending if you have your day start in the evening, it can make your day off by a whole 24 hours. So then you will miss that appointed time with Yahweh. Because it's just where how kind of rounding works. Like you know what flooring is and ceiling?
Again, please repeat.
So this is a math concept. I'm just trying to think of the best way to describe it. Do you know what floor is? where you round down.
Flores?
Flooring is when you round down, and ceiling is when you round up. Okay.
Okay, yeah.
And so in these things, you don't just randomly go up or down. You look for the event, and then you wait for the next event to happen. So that's where it would, in math terms, it would be called ceiling, because you do one event and then the next event. And so depending on when one event happens, like the dark conjunction, if it's before or after the sunrise or the sunset, depending what you're going by, or by twilight, or I mean astronomical dawn, it will change when your moon starts, which then will put your whole calendar off by a whole 24 hours, right? So it does make a difference.
Do you mind if I actually share some scriptural proof as to why the day begins in the morning?
Sure. I have 3 posts on that in my morning
Well, it
resource
sounds
page,
New
but if you
Testament.
have some.
Sounds like there'd be a lot of New Testament on the morning star.
Yeah.
The morning star is a little different, but anyways, but let Ben talk about the morning.
Okay, so I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna tie back into creation and show God's pattern for telling the days.
Okay, let me get Genesis up. Because you're doing Genesis 1, I'm pretty sure, right?
Yep, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yep, and we're going to go through the days, and we're going to see that the pattern remains constant throughout.
Now, just FYI, Genesis 1 through 2 is a new moon day. And we can get into that issue, or we can just kind of skip that issue, Charles. But there's actually more days in this than most people realize.
So, but the pattern gets set here, starting with the creation of light. So the creation of the light. It's starting in verse 3. And okay, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. Okay, so here we have his work day. The sun's there's the rise starting with the work day. And then it says, and the evening and the morning were the first day. So you have the work day, then you have the evening, then you have the morning. One day.
That's your day. Now, one thing, I'm just going to interject a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
There's the 4 watches at night, right? The 4 night watches.
Yep.
The first night watch is called evening. The last night watch is actually called morning. And so the way that I read this is you have your time for work, then here's the first part of the night, and then the last part of the night, and that's all your day.
Let's see if that's a fluke. Let's go to the next day. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. And the evening and the morning were the second day. Once again, these are references to night watches. So you have, once again, day 2, you have your work day, you have your evening watch, and then you have your morning watch. So we have now 2 days established. Third day, let's get a third witness. God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, let the earth bring forth grass and herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the third day. workday, evening watch, morning watch. Now we're moving forward into day 4. You see that pattern repeating itself throughout the creation. This is how God tells his time. Sunrise, workday, evening watch, morning watch, sunrise is a new day.
Well, that makes sense from a practical viewpoint, just in terms of work, separating work from rest days.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you want, assuming you're done right with that. Right now.
Yeah, the proof. I believe. I don't believe it's necessary to whip the dead horse at this point.
Sure. But if you do that on your own, Charles, I have on my morning resource page, I do that. Okay. Highlights from sunrise or sunset really gets into this. And they give multiple examples from the Old Testament that shows that the day starts in the morning. On the morrow and morning, I do that from the Book of Mormon. If you are interested in that one. And then also in this one, the Undiscovered Sabbath Secret You Should Know, it shows tons of examples from the Old Testament that the day starts in the morning. And my favorite one from the Old Testament is manna. You could collect manna up to the morning. Now, if the Sabbath started in the evening, that means you could collect on the Sabbath, but you're not allowed to collect on the Sabbath. So it shows that the Sabbath starts in the morning, and thus the day starts in the morning, because you had 24 hours to collect manna and keep it, because at the end of that 24 hours, it went bad and got worms, right?
So like in Church of God, they would do the Passover. They'd start the Passover in the evening. So that'd be important for them, I suppose.
Now, this one's an interesting issue. So the Passover is supposed to start in the evening, but you have to the end of that day, the morning, to eat the lamb, and then you're supposed to burn what's left over, gone. You have to eat the lamb within the same day up to that. So it does start in the evening, because that's when Yeshua was sacrificed, and it's pointing to him. Because it actually, the evening, it's between the evenings. So between high noon and sunset, which is about, give or take, 3 o'clock our time, is when you're supposed to start it. But anyways.
Here's another question that comes to mind. With appointed time, so like in Church of God, one of their justifications for the keeping the feast days of the Old Testament was that they used it. They thought it could help calculate the second coming, right? Because it will return on the last day of Tabernacles, right?
Yeah. So a lot of people think it's going to start in the fall feasts. So I disagree with that, but let's kind of go off of this a little bit. So Yeshua has.
My point was the value of appointed times, right? So like from my Presbyterian tradition, like they don't keep, of course, any of the Old Testament feast days, but they're Sabbatarian Sunday keepers. And so they felt, well, the value is public worship and the memorial of Christ, his resurrection, but public worship. So like, is the value, and what I'm wondering is keeping the appointed times in terms of his blessings, it's obedience, right? His blessings, but also his presence. Is he more present at those times because he's blessed them?
I believe he's more present. In fact,
and is this something that God, for his glory, would expect public worship, right? And the Lunar Sabbatarians, do they do public worship? Or are they mostly doing home worship? We do a lot of home worship here at our house, by the way. I'm just.
You should be doing both, I would say. Like this is public, right? In fact, so public it goes on YouTube after. But I would say So Ezekiel 31.
Awesome.
You know, in today's society, the mark of the beast is a really big deal. It's a hot topic to talk about, right? It's not a chip. It's not a barcode. It is perversion of Yahweh's ways. And
Perversion of
specifically,
worship.
perversion of Sabbath and worship. Because, and I'll get that. Exodus 31:13. Speak thou also unto the children of Israel, saying, Verily my Sabbaths, plural, shall you keep, for it is a sign, first is a mark between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am Yahweh, that does sanctify you. So the sign that you're under Yeshua's authority is to keep his Sabbaths, aka weekly Sabbath, lunar Sabbath, yearly Sabbath. Now, let's go look at the Exodus. A big example of this is Passover, right?
Huh?
If someone kept Passover on the wrong day, would their firstborn been okay? No, their firstborn would have got killed if they kept it on the wrong day. And that, what happens if you have the mark of the beast, or aka not having Yahweh's seal upon you? It's death, just like with Passover.
The one commandment that has the seal of Yahweh on it in Exodus chapter 20.
Hi, Christy.
Hi.
Let's go to Exodus chapter 20,
Okay, let me
where,
get that.
where we can see the one commandment that has Yahweh's seal on it. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the seventh day and hallowed it. So here, when you have a seal, that seal contains your office, your jurisdiction, and your name. All of these things are present only in the fourth commandment. It contains the seal of Yahweh. On the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God, of Yahweh, the Sabbath of Yahweh. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days Yahweh made heaven and earth and sea, his jurisdiction, and all things that in them are, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it, stating his authority. Only he can hallow a day. There's the seal of God.
So to go with
Okay, that helps, and I think that answers my question. And I need to go back and read some of the Sabbatarian polemics, from the 19th century when you had the big Seventh Day movement, where and also the Puritan period, because
Sure.
this came up in the Commonwealth with the Seventh Day Baptists. So I just need to go back and rehash some of that, but I think that's pretty much sums it, the mark, why it should be kept, and it's a sign to last all generations. That helps me.
The only hope for the Gentiles is to become adopted into Israel. And when we're adopted into the family of Israel, we do what Israel does.
Right.
Here's my last question, because I don't want to derail your study.
No, that's
But my
fine.
last
This
question
is to
When I've read the Book of Mormon
people.
only once. I've only read it once, but I didn't see anything. It seemed to be a first day, you know, and when they mention anything of anything about public worship, it seems like it's first day. And so I'm wondering where do we get, like, with the strand? Is it the stringites?
Stringites? Yeah, Stringites. They do the seventh day on the
How does
Gregorian
that
calendar.
work in Mormonism?
So most mainstream Mormonism, so the two biggest ones are Brighamites, LDS, and the Community of Christ, or RLDS, the Josephites. They worship on Sunday. The third one, oh no, I'm forgetting.
Temple Lot?
No, not Temple. The Campbellites, I think it is. Anyways, there's another one that's kind of more Pentecostal. There's Sunday also.
The Bickertonites.
The Bickernite, yeah, that's the one I'm thinking of. The
Bickernite,
Bickernites. They're Sunday also. The Stringites are the only ones that will do Saturday, which I believe is wrong. There's a few of us, like 3 of us here. Christy's learning about it, so hope I'm not speaking too much out of place. Are Lunarsabitorians. Because it's, if I remember correctly, Chris even stated that it was placed on her heart to start looking into it. Hopefully I'm not remembering incorrectly for her. But there's being to be more restorationists that are doing Lunar Sabbath. And the ones that I know about are in my Lunar Sabbath group and in my Nazarene Mormon group. And so I am a Lunar Sabbatarian, and I call myself a Nazarene Mormon. And to put it simply, not to sidetrack on this, but I'm happy to get into details of anything. A Nazarene is a mix between a Jew and a Christian, to keep it simple. Now we can get into more depth than that if you want, but that's what a Nazarene is.
So are you Seventh Day? Or
No,
you,
I'm a Lunar Sabbatarian.
okay, so you just keep
But-
the other Sabbaths, which is the lunar ones, in
Right.
addition to the day of rest, which you understand being the first day. Is that correct?
No, the day of
No,
rest is
the
the
day of
seventh
rest
day.
is 7th day.
But it's based on the new moon day. It's based off of the new moon day. You have the new moon day, 7 days.
So you have
Okay.
New Moon Day, you then have 6 days of work, and then you have your Sabbath. 6 days of work, your Sabbath. 6 days of work,
Oh,
your Sabbath.
okay. So
6
you're
days of work,
the
your
seventh
Sabbath,
day
and then you go New
in
Moon
the
Day.
framework
And
of
then
the lunar.
right.
Yeah.
This
the
is
Sabbath
where,
is in the framework of the moon.
Okay.
right. And
Because
this
it's
is
supposed to
where,
be.
You're not connected to the Gregorian calendar that
No.
way, or the Julian. You're just going by the new moons.
correct.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
sun and the moon. Because
Sun
the
and
day
moon,
you
okay.
use the sun to
That's the Genesis.
start the day, you use the moon to know what day it is.
Okay.
And then you
Okay.
use the sun and the moon to start the year.
Okay. Thank you.
I've put a lot of research and study and code into this, so I can answer quite a few questions on this.
How does that work with the Mormon revelation, with the scriptures in the early Mormonism?
So the early Mormons, they did not know this. Now, an interesting thing is there's a revelation, D&C 59 in the LDS canon, which is about the Sabbath. And it's interesting, little tidbit, it was given on a lunar Sabbath. So a lot of people will say, well, it was on Sunday, so that must be when the Sabbath is, right? Well, it was on a Sunday, but when you go do the calculations, it was also a lunar Sabbath. And that's what this picture is trying to show, that that was a lunar Sabbath. Because the next day was a new moon day. So along this point, though, I have a post on this. You'll never hear me say that, but anyways, I have a post much versus all. So in is it second Nephi?
First Nephi.
Oh yeah, First Nephi 14. There's a verse that I base this all upon, that Joseph Smith is not to restore everything. He got it started. And then later, how much you know about Mormonism, there's going to be a mighty and strong one coming. Now, this gets controversial because a lot of people will claim that Joseph Smith is the mighty and strong one. He's not. And we can sidetrack into that if you want. And I can show that from 2 Nephi 3 and JST 50. It was not him. I mean, I can show that from, what is it? D&C 109, is it? I'm forgetting, because in fact, I have a recording on those D&C verses, if you want to go look at those.
What page are you on right now? What's the slash of the page?
Oh, this is scripture studies. This is where I kind of, all these recordings I do, I put them up here. So you can go, everyone that have been recorded, they're right there. It might get up a week late, but they get there. But so a big thing about 103, 101, and 105 is about Joseph Smith. And a lot of people will misread those to try to prove that Joseph Smith is the mighty one. And I went through these with Ben and his brother Matt, and just shows, no, that's not what it's doing. And I just plainly read the scriptures and expound them. Joseph Smith is not the mighty one, okay? And it's not even his seed. It's Joseph of Egypt's seed is going to be the mighty and strong one, not Joseph Smith's. Because that's a problem with the community of Christ. They think the community of Christ thinks that it's going to be of Joseph Smith's seed and not Joseph of Egypt's seed.
Found that verse. Found that verse about much versus all.
Oh, okay. So let's go look at that real quick. And I'll get that in my favorite edition of the Book of Mormon.
First Nephi chapter 13, verse 34.
Oh, I was off the chapter. Dang it. Oh well.
Oh, it happens.
I don't listen to me at all.
Perfect.
I was off a chapter.
Nobody's perfect.
Well, there was one that was.
Yeah, but he's not here. But he's not on the Zoom call necessarily.
No, he wasn't. Why does it do that? I still, anyways, sorry. So First Nephi 13.
Mhm.
I like this edition more, except for the scrolling on the Kindle edition. Okay, which verse?
34.
Okay. There we go. You want to read it?
Yep. And it came to pass that the angel of the Lord spake unto me, saying, Behold, saith the Lamb, after I have visited the remnant of the house of Israel, and this remnant of which I speak is the seed of thy father. Scroll up. I need you to scroll up.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Wherefore, after I have visited them in judgment and smitten them by the hand of the Gentiles, and after the Gentiles do stumble exceedingly because of the most plain and precious parts of the gospel of the Lamb, which have been kept back by that abominable church, which is the mother of harlots, saith the Lamb, wherefore I will be merciful unto the Gentiles in that day, saith the Lamb, insomuch that I will bring forth unto them in mine own power much of my gospel. Not all, much. Which shall be plain and precious, saith the Lamb.
So, on that point, that's an important thing to remember. Okay, he didn't restore everything. Now my much versus all post main focus, I mean, I have some sidetracks in there, but the main focus is contrasting that with D&C 132, that it states Joseph Smith restored everything. showing that D&C 132 is in error. I don't believe 132 is authentic, but that's a whole nother discussion. I believe Joseph Smith was monogamous his whole life, contrary to what is commonly taught today. And I have a resource page on that if you want to get in those details, and I'll give it to you. But
Put very simply, there are no number one, there are no descendants from anyone other than Nema.
yeah,
Number two,
Brigham Young changed his
nothing but
Joseph
in
Smith's
terms
words.
of the in terms of references to marriages, everything is second and third hand,
and after the fact,
and after the fact.
Not contemporary. In fact, people who claimed it all the time, they wouldn't go to court. The Temple Lot case, they would not swear to it. They'll preach it all day long, but when they have to say it, when there's consequences, if they're proven that they're liars, they wouldn't do it. Another fact is D&C 1835 D&C 101. It states that marriage is a crime and that one man,
Or
one
the
wife.
plural marriage is a crime.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Thank you for correcting me. And we can go look at that if you want. And people will say, well, that got snuck in. That's not true. I have the votes page. So the D&C has a page where votes were taken on everything. And within those votes is specifically mentioned the 1835 101 section, which is about monogamy. And everybody voted that that was the case. And so there's a little page I have on that, and I add some glyphs to help you better understand what's going on with.
And also included in that vote was the lectures on faith, which many in some LDS communities now state weren't even written by Joseph Smith, but that they were not
Community Christ,
they were not formally approved.
yeah, and Community Christ teaches the same thing, but I have a post that actually, one thing I bring out from there is how Joseph Smith spent tons of his time on that. So let me get you that post if you want it. It's my Holy Spirit post. I give tons of quotes that shows that Joseph Smith worked on it a lot. Okay. And then also on my lectures on faith page, on the preference page, talks about how oh no, it's the votes page, shows that Joseph Smith worked on it. According to the D&C, Joseph Smith worked on it itself, the votes page. So I understand history has been modified, but the 1835 D&C has not. No one argues whether if that's been modified or not. That's solid, something to really go off of. And within that book itself, it states Joseph Smith worked on it. So, and there's a lot of other resources that show that too, that I put in my Holy Spirit, Holy Ghost post. But that's sidetracking a bit, so hopefully that wasn't too much overload. Charles, you're muted. I don't know if you want to say something.
I think that's it. You guys I came on late at a little bit after 7 o'clock.
That's fine.
And so we just doing, just family stuff. I wanted to catch this though.
No,
I
yeah,
think
so,
interesting, and understanding the calendar is one of the things I'd like to better comprehend. So yeah,
Sure.
go ahead and
so
you can I'm sorry for interrupting. I
No,
appreciate
well,
everything
here, I'm going to show you
what
something.
you
You're
shared here, and
not
I'm writing
interrupting.
down some links.
So here's a
Okay.
verse from the Book of Mormon, Moroni 6:9, and this is about how you should conduct your meetings, okay, or your fellowships, your Sabbath. And their meetings were conducted by the church after the manner of the working of the Spirit, and by the power of the Holy Ghost, For as the power of the Holy Ghost led them, whether to preach, or to exhort, or to pray, or to supplicate, to sing, or whatever so was done. So the way, a big part that I take out of that is that we help each other with our questions. And so if you have a question, we're here to help each other with that. I'm not one to just sit here and preach a sermon.
Another thing is, you know, I appreciate Zoom, but a lot of the churches have gone like, you know, they've created this option, even that they're still where you can go to Zoom. I think public worship is, you know, is always preferable, face to face, person to person. So I've always tried to strive for local meetings with people, but I understand this is a small community that you have, and the only way you can get in touch really is through using the internet. That's okay, but I'm kind of Zoom phobic. You know what I mean? I like to use less technology. I think it's a big issue. And then church.
I agree.
Today,
in person would be more preferable, but like you said, we're a small community, so that just doesn't happen.
I live in California.
Stephen's located in Argentina.
Yeah, I'm in Argentina right now. So.
Oh, okay.
You can come fly down and visit if you want.
But yeah, thank you. Having summer, right?
Yeah, I'm summer right now. Yeah.
And then, yeah, I'm in Texas right now. We're in the middle of a real cold snap.
Were you, Christy? I don't remember.
I'm in Phoenix, Arizona.
Oh, that's hot there too.
Have you missed our cold snap from the Midwest?
Yeah, it's been in the 70s here, so.
Oh, geez. Yeah. makes me wish I was in Phoenix.
Mhm.
So I have a combo of you know, all the scripture, and I got this from an elder up in Northern California. It's the last fellowship of the RLDS branches in California that he runs. His name's Glenn Drobny. He gave me this combo.
Do they call
it? So the D&C here is, you know, enumerated by RLDS, Community of Christ.
They're a little different.
We had Patrick McKay come out and visit our house this summer. He came by.
He's a nice guy. He's a nice guy.
So my understanding, like the apologies for Joseph Smith and marriage, I heard my brother's opinion from Utah LDS, and I've heard, you know, RLDS.
Sure. On that point, I'm more RLDS, but I'm not really. LDS and RLDS both have their unique problems in my mind. Okay, and we could go over that if you want, but one thing that I like, this is a good Wikipedia page that shows the different numbers between the two. And my recent posts, I put both numbering systems when there's an overlap on them. Now it's interesting. The LDS Church claims continuous revelation, right? But the only one that really publishes and canonizes those is the RLDS Church. Now I disagree with the ones that they put in. And there's a few in the LDS one that I don't believe are authentic, which ironically, it's ones that the RLDS Church don't find authentic either. But I've done it not because of them, but because of what's being taught in there. Okay, because what's being taught in those sections contradict other scriptures.
More about content, and the facts of the matter are, Joseph Smith himself said that if any man brought before you a communication that he said was from the Lord, you needed to check it against the Bible, Book of Mormon, and the Doctrine and Covenants. And he said that when they were using the 1835 Doctrine and Covenants, by the way.
Correct. Yep. In fact, I
That's
have those quotes if you want, but
that's a good quote, because Brigham, you know, claimed differently that
Oh, yeah,
it doesn't matter we could reverse revelation. And that's what my brother, and
Oh,
I
that's
think,
that's an
well,
Islamic.
Williamson even said
That-
something. Yeah.
That's an
Well,
Islamic.
where's that quote Joseph said that it cannot contradict the prior revelation? I appreciate that. If you ever
Oh,
share
I
it.
hit the wrong button. Oh, yeah, I'll get that to you. In fact, I can show
Yeah.
it I can show it from the Book of Mormon. I can show it from Joseph Smith. I can show it from the Lectures on Faith. I can show it from the D&C. I can show it from the Old Testament, the New Testament. It's all over.
Oh yeah.
I'll give you the one that you're asking for. I'm
Yeah.
just saying it's all over.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
that would
That one right
help
there.
in my conversation with family and stuff.
Yeah, so the main part is right here. The whole quote has some interesting points to it, which I can expound to you if you want, and it's Hebrewisms, and there's a lot of Hebrewisms in this quote, but the main part that you want is this last part that I just highlighted.
But there's also this one here, the one just beneath it. If any man preaches to you doctrines contrary to the Bible, the Book of Mormon, or the Book of Doctrine and Covenants, set him down as an impostor.
Mhm.
Try them by the principles contained in the acknowledged word of God. If they preach or teach or practice contrary to that, disfellowship them, cut them off from among you as useless and dangerous branches. That's my favorite quote regarding what we're
you
supposed
put
to
the
do.
link?
What's that?
Link that you're at. Could you put the
Oh.
link in the chat
I'll put it in the
on that if there's a link?
This is on my OneNote,
Okay.
but I'll give it to you.
Thanks.
If you
Yeah,
want,
those-
I have a
those are-
link to my OneNote though. I probably need to do one at a time. I put all my notes where people can go get to them if they want to, and I'll give you that if you want. The thing is, you just
Yeah,
have to know
that-
the
that-
keywords to search.
Yeah, that one right there is my favorite quote. It's from the Times and Seasons, so you can actually look that up on the internet, actually get it from its original source. The Times and Seasons, if any man preaches to you doctrines contrary to the Bible, the Book of Mormon, and the Book of Doctrine and Covenants. And this was when the 1835 Doctrine and Covenants was being used.
So my absolute favorite for this subject is the Book of Mormon, and it's this one right
Yeah.
here, 2 Nephi 29. I'll just do a couple highlights from it. Testimony of two nations is a witness unto you that I am Elohim, that I remember the nation, one nation like unto another. Wherefore I speak the same words unto one nation like unto another nation. And when the two nations shall run together, the testimony of the two nations shall run together also. And I do this that I may prove I am the same yesterday, today, and forever. And not, so those are the main points of this, but it says, I speak the same thing to different people, to everyone, and I do that all the time. He never contradicts himself. Never.
Therefore, to set the word of God against itself is a fool's errand and marks one as a fool. When one says that the New Testament supersedes the Old Testament, they mark themselves a fool.
They don't understand it if they think it does. In fact, I've challenged people. Find me a law in the New Testament that's not based on a law in the Old Testament. In fact, I would even say it differently, but once you really start getting some understanding, there is no quote unquote law in the New Testament that's not expounding the law from the Old Testament, helping you understand the Old Testament law better. It's not new. In fact, probably my favorite examples of that. Oops, if I hit the right button. So
Once again, I apologize for my candor. I tend to speak quite, I'm a hammer and everything's a nail.
that's fine. I think you're preaching truth. I wouldn't worry about it then. So in the New Testament, Yeshua stated I give you a new commandment to love God and to love your neighbor. Now, in today's language, I think a better translation would be a renewed commandment, because that's not a new commandment. Here's in Torah, thou shalt love thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and all thy might. So if it was in Torah, it couldn't be a brand spanking new commandment, as we generally think it is. If you look in the 1828 dictionary, you look under new, renew is one of those definitions, okay? Because there's multiple definitions to words. One of them in the new is renew. Now let's go look at love your neighbor. Oh, look, that's in the Torah also. Thou shalt not avenge, nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Oh, wait a minute. That wasn't a
Oh.
brand spanking new commandment.
Oh,
That
wow.
was a renewed commandment. So I believe Yeshua was a restorer like Joseph Smith and Moses. Now,
Well, this is,
obviously,
I mean,
Yeshua was much more than just a restorer, but he was restoring people back to truth. That's one of the things he did. Go ahead, Ben.
yeah, one of the things that really drives home the fact is thou shalt not avenge, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. And now he states his authority, I am Yahweh.
Yeah.
It's under his authority. And when Jesus restates this commandment, he doesn't teach it new. When he restates this commandment, he does it under his own authority, just as it was in Leviticus.
Right, because Yeshua is Yahweh incarnated. But that's another subject. Sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah.
There you go. There's me and my squirrels again. Oh well.
No, that's
sorry.
fine. We both do it, Ben. We both do it. Anyways, did that make that clear, Charles? There's nothing new. There's not any new commandments, and Torah was not done away with. Law of Moses was, but that's a whole nother subject, and I'm happy to get into it.
Okay, I have the quotes for time and seasons, and I'll just refer back to that.
Sure. So back on the calendar a little bit. Let me give you my playlist for that. Come on. Sometimes let's put this over here.
Darn computers for being so absolutely logical.
Yeah. Well, I understand why they're that way, because I actually my job is bossing computers around, aka software engineer. So, anyways, but in this playlist is a really good one on learning about the lunar Sabbath or the lunar solar calendar. Now, this is a hodgepodge of other teachings that I like from other people. I don't agree 100% with each one of them, but the general overall concepts I do agree with, okay? There's little nitty-gritty details I will be different on, but they're good resources, and that's why I put it in this big playlist. But starting in video 2 in this list is actually a series of videos of 3 that helped convert me to the lunar Sabbath. And the big part is that during the first three moons of the Exodus, the Sabbath was always on the 8th, 15th, 22nd, and 29th. 3 moons in a row. That's only possible on a lunar Sabbath, a lunar solar calendar. Now, in the Gregorian calendar, you can get that with 2 months in a row, right? Because of February. You can't get that on the Gregorian calendar with 3 months in a row or 3 moons in a row, as more properly stated.
And you can only do that on leap year.
Gregorian no, it'd be non-leap year that you get that, not leap
no,
year.
8. Yeah. Well,
No.
either way, no,
What's
because
the
you
2
don't have
months?
out on non-leap year, you don't have 29 days in February.
No, maybe you misunderstood what I was trying to say.
Well, yeah,
Non-leap year, you can get days of the month on the same day, right?
right.
That's more what I was pointing to. But you're right, it's missing.
Yeah,
the
but it's
eighth
missing
day.
the 29th day, and therefore you can't have it.
But that's only if you believe in new moon day. If you just believe a continuous 7-day cycle, you want the 20.
Oh, yeah, you've got a point. You've got a point. Then,
And
then you can have them all be on the same day.
right. And that's more what I'm going at. That.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. But I do agree with you, but I'm going more at defeating the Gregorian concept.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine. Maybe I didn't make it clear.
Yeah.
But during the 3 first moons of the Exodus, it is demonstratable by scriptures that the Sabbath was always on the 8th, 15th, 22nd, and 29th. That's only possible with the lunar solar calendar, aka lunar Sabbath. And then again with Joshua, when he did Passover, it just by coincidence, 40 years later, the Sabbath was on the same 8th, 15th, 22nd, 29th again. And then, I mean, there's tons of examples of this through the scriptures, including the New Testament. The Sabbath is always on the 8th, 15th, 22nd, 29th, without fail. That is not a Gregorian calendar. Not to mention some of the problems we talked about the Gregorian calendar earlier, right? Because how man fixed it, and if you think God needs men to fix his calendar, you have the wrong God. Because Yahweh is perfect, and his ways are perfect, and his signs are perfect. They don't need to be fixed by man. But anyway.
And so while to some it may seem that the Sabbath on the lunisolar calendar is sliding all over the calendar, that's only because the Gregorian calendar is sliding all over God's calendar.
Yeah. In fact, with my app, you can see that. Right, let me share that again. So, see on the lunar Sabbath calendar, here's the Sabbaths are blue, the weekly Sabbaths. The moonlies are the red and the orange, okay? I'll go to next moon. Oh, look, they're at the same time. Same place, right? Oh, look, again. I mean, I could keep doing it, but you get the point. It's on the exact same day of the week on the right calendar. Now, if you go to the Gregorian calendar, so like here, last lunar cycle, it was on Thursday. On the current lunar cycle that just started today, it's on Friday. So it looks like it's shifting. You're muted, Charles, if you wanted to say something.
My kid. It was just my kid.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Moving on.
So I have these two different views. And I'm showing here, the Sabbath doesn't shift according to God's calendar. It will look like it shift if you think Gregorian mode. Now, one thing I have here, because we're in a Gregorian world, right, on the calendar. So I have the Gregorian calendar, but then I overlay it with the lunar solar. So like the 10th moon, the first day, as you can see right there. Because most of us, we all live in the Gregorian calendar just because of the world, right? And so it's nice to see it in this mode. But if you want it in the lunar solar mode, you have that here. And then I overlay it under bottom the Gregorian date there. So like today's is 12/23. And then just FYI, so you know what's going on, this blue line right here is showing that it's Hanukkah. Today's part of Hanukkah. And here.
Yes, we have been enjoying our Hanukkah treats.
Well, actually, let me do this. I have a page where you can get all the high holidays. Hanukkah and Purim is a setting if you want to turn it on and off. But here's the 7 commanded ones: Passover, unleavened, first fruits, Pentecost, trumpets, atonement, trumpets. Tabernacles. Sorry, I said that wrong. And then if you want, this is one of the improvements I've made to speed it up. You go turn the yearly on. I have to go close it. Hold on. reopen it. It takes longer to start now. This is one of the improvements I did to speed it up, is make those yearly pages optional. Because that's what slows it down for people who don't want to wait for it. It's those yearly pages, because I have tons of controls on those. It's taking a while. Even anyway, so hold on. Just be a little patient. Maybe I should have just turned one on instead of both.
It takes.
Yeah, Ben's probably
Takes
used to it
myself,
because
but,
he's running a version more like this, right?
yes, I keep the yearly ones on.
Yeah. Well, you don't have the setting to turn it off. That's
No,
one
I
thing I'm
don't.
going to be pushing in a
Yeah.
week or so. Yeah, I forgot how long this is. Sorry, people. I was still learning the .maui framework, so I didn't know how to turn them on and off. I do now, and so I'm almost done. Holy mackerel, there we go. Okay.
There you go. With Hanukkah and Purim, is the understanding it's a custom or is it commanded? Like a new revelation, added revelation. How does
So Hanukkah is not commanded,
most people
but
understand?
Yeshua did celebrate it. Okay. With Purim, I have mixed feelings.
I'm actually fairly aggressively anti-Purim.
I'm getting that way. I've never celebrated it. I just thought, whatever. If people want it, I'll put it in the app. Just
But if you
so
take a look at it, if you take a look at it, a lot of the things that are surrounding, a lot of the things that surround it, it's very pagan in its roots.
Yeah, I had a friend, Monica, send me some links, and I haven't celebrated it before. And I'm pretty much of the mode now telling people that they shouldn't. In fact, I'm close to adding that to my pagan holiday resource page, the things I've gotten, because it's just pagan.
I believe that the Festival of Lights was an inspired innovation. I believe that Jesus believed that as well. Because
I don't know if it was innovation. I think Adam did it, but it's
You
not a
think Adam did
commanded
it?
one. Yeah, I do. But it's not commanded. And I think there's multiple reasons for that, but that's neither here or there. But I do
Okay, so
believe,
it's just, yeah, okay, just not commanded.
I do
But
believe Hanukkah is authentic, just not commanded.
Okay, it's authentic, not commanded. Purim is traditional.
And I am very much leaning a pagan Babylon tradition.
Yes. Just like the book of Esther has very strong pagan Babylon stuff kind of associated with it.
Yeah. And now I think I know why I never felt inclined to work to celebrate it, because yeah. Anyways, I'll just leave it at that. But I'm trying to. The emulator is slower than in real life, right, Ben?
Yeah, exactly.
That's just how emulators work, right?
Yeah, that's the way it goes.
Wait, come on. There we go. Okay. So here you can see on the Gregorian, it looks like the Sabbath is shifting, right? And so here you can see the different holidays, the underline of blues. So that's one's going to be, that one's Purim. This one's going to be Passover and Feast of Unleavened Bread, First Fruit Unleavened Bread, Shavuot, Pentecost, Trumpets, Day of Atonement, Tabernacles, and Hanukkah.
Festival of Lights.
So that's what the lines are. Now, let's go to the better mode, the lunar solar mode, okay? Okay, come on. Sorry, emulators are not great. So the reason it takes a while is because there's so many controls to do all this, because I have all the numbers and then the lines underneath, and yeah. That's why with the new mode, the update, you have a setting to turn the yearlies on. Now, look at the Sabbaths now. They're all in alignment. No change.
And every single one of them on the 8th, 15th, 22nd, and 29th of the moon.
And you'll see sometimes there's 29 days and sometimes there's 30 because of the change that happened around 700 BC. And sometimes we have the leap moon. But anyways, this one we don't. But it's consistent. 6 days work, Sabbath. 6 days work, Sabbath. Oh, now we have new moon day. So this rest right from here to here was 2 days. Nowhere in scriptures you'll see that your rest is always 1 day or only 1 day.
Mhm.
It never says how long your rest is. It's because sometimes it's 1, sometimes it's 2, and sometimes it's 3. In Noah's day, it was either 1 or 3. Our day, because of the lunar cycle issue, it's 1, 2, or 3. So, anyways, and then I'll just show this off. Someone made this for me, and it goes how it's calculated. No stars. See how no stars. Sun, moon, and shadow of the sun. See, this is like a sundial on the moon. Because that's how it should be determined, by the sun and the moon. Shadows are determined by the sun, because it's the direct sunlight from the sun. Anyways. Does Charles or Christy have any questions on that? No? Okay.
No, I'm just gonna I'll download the app, and then that looks very useful. It looks
Yeah, it's a little slow right now. Pretty soon I'll have an update that'll make it much faster, because I'll make it so you can just load the pages that you want. Right now I have a setting to make it so you can just, the yearlies are optional, but I've decided to make it a little faster by making it so you can do the Gregorian and the lunar solar optional. So that way you just have one of those. So if you always just want the Gregorian, which is what most people will probably look at, you can make it even just a slightly faster. So I have a few more little updates to do, but it's getting close to push the update. And Charles is frozen. They're okay. Anyways. So unless Charles or Christy has a question, I had one thing I wanted to share. So unless you guys have something, I want to share a thought that I have to basically be Bereans together to check me on it, because I haven't checked myself on it yet because I've been busy on other things. And so maybe I thought we could do it together as a group, unless you guys have some other questions you want to talk about. No? Okay. So, Abraham and Isaac. There's a point with that I've always struggled with, right? And I've never really known what to do with it, but I've just let it be, because I mean, I believe Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were real and that they're prophets. And I didn't know what to do with this, okay? But supposedly, Yahweh told Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. I don't know a text that actually states that. I know people will read into that to get that. And my problem with it is, first of all, if someone did something that was deserving of capital punishment, that is not how Torah states for capital punishment to be done. Okay? So a little more than a week ago, I believe I got an answer on this. Now, let me give some background. So in Torah, the firstborn son is supposed to be given to Yahweh. Now, if you don't, you're supposed to pay a redeeming price for your firstborn son, so that way he doesn't have to be his, so you can keep him yourself. Also, to go along with this, who is, even with the wicked Egyptians, who was the only ones that were killed? It was the firstborn sons. The firstborn sons are Yahweh's. They're rightfully Yahweh's. Period. Now, in Torah, there's the thing where you can redeem them and you can keep them yourself, okay? And this points to Yahweh. And it was the firstborn sons who weren't underneath Yeshua's covenant that are the ones that got destroyed, right? Abraham grew up in a pagan society that when they gave their sons to their false god, they literally sacrificed them, did human sacrifice, okay? So what I believe what happened, Yahweh told Abraham that Isaac was his. But sadly, Abraham, instead of doing it Yahweh's way, did it the pagan way, because now I believe Yahweh told him how it was supposed to be beforehand, and Abraham probably forgot. Because I don't know about you guys, but as you unlearn false traditions and to try to learn the right traditions, sometimes you forget the right ways and still go back to the wrong ways sometimes, right? I don't know about you guys, but I have, okay? I think that's what happened with Abraham. Yahweh told, okay, Isaac is mine. You need to give him to me. Abraham went back on his false pagan traditions that his father taught him and did it that way, instead of the way that Yahweh intended to do it. But at the same time, Yahweh took that history to teach us about him and his son.
Okay.
That is what I believe happened.
Okay. In the record, what it says, Genesis chapter 22.
Okay, so let's go get there.
Mhm.
Let me.
Now, there are several things that lead me to believe that the King James is a bad translation. Number one, it says that God tempted Abraham, did tempt Abraham.
Yeah, so actually on along those lines, let's go, first of all, let's go see if there's a JST, right? That's going to be a good thing. And then we can go to Bible Hub, because yes, I do agree that
It does say that that's the Hebrew, that the Hebrew for that says means test or prove.
well, I still think it was a test.
Yeah. Oh, well, of course, it's always a
But
test.
if anything, but what was it a test of? Was it that he would kill him? I don't believe so. Or that he would
Well,
actually
and,
give his son.
After we go through here, we also need to go through Hebrews.
Sure.
Because, and James.
So there are,
Because James actually has a lot to say about this in his reference to, as he's talking about faith and works.
okay. You know the New Testament better than I do. So you'll kind of lead and guide us as you're testing my belief here. Right. So which verse do you want to look at in 22?
Okay, 22. Let's see. Well, we'll start in verse 1. And it came to pass after these things that God did try Abraham and said unto him, Abraham. Abraham said, Behold, here am I. And the Lord said, Take now thy son, thine only Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering. Tells him straightly to offer him for a burnt offering on one of the mountains, which I will tell thee of.
Oh, well, for a burnt offering. Okay. Well,
And Abraham rose up early in the morning and saddled his ass and took 2 of his young men with him and Isaac his son.
Okay,
And gave,
hold on. Let's go look at Bible Hub on that verse, because that right there would almost kind of go along that my theory is wrong, right? Just that
Yeah.
verse right there.
just that verse alone.
Which kind of saddens me, but let's go do Bible Hub. Genesis 22, and that was verse 2, I think, right?
Yeah, verse 2. The burnt offering section. Okay, burnt offering. Go and set
Oh, first offer. Okay, look at this. To go up, ascend, climb. So
Okay.
that we got to be careful with this, because some people do it just to get what they want, but at the same time, that doesn't actually say offering, does it?
Yeah, but what about the word for burnt?
Okay, let's look at that one. In fact, actually, we got to
Because the two together, if you isolate the 2 words apart from each other, you can make it. And again, it's ascent. The idea is
ascend. Well, but that's not burnt. I'll be honest. How are they getting burnt out of a scent, other than the smoke going up, right?
right. The smoke ascends. That's the idea.
Sure. But let's look at the interlinear a little bit. Only
Yeah.
send, now take. So let's take. Fetch. Lay hold of.
Seize.
Well, seize is like, maybe it could go along with what the English is kind of saying, right?
Receive. Yep. Receive.
Take
Apply.
may not necessarily say that, or fetch, right? Acquire, I don't know what to do with that one. Buy, bring wouldn't go with that, because it just come along, right? Marry wouldn't go along with this context.
Mhm.
Snatch could go along with how the English is. Take away could go with the English. So just looking at various of these words, there's some that would go with how the English currently is, and some that would say maybe it's not, right?
Let's go down to the burnt offering.
Oh, okay.
That seems to be where the hang up is.
Well, maybe, because like here, the take is more, that translation was saying it'd be more him, but if he comes along, it doesn't necessarily mean it would be him. Because more what I would be getting on with this, they could just do the wood offering.
Well, yeah, I could.
Possibly, right? I'm just thinking out loud here.
Yeah,
Okay?
I could.
But let's go to the burn.
It's possible.
So there's a lot being translated from this one word as a burnt offering. Okay. Whole burnt offering.
Ascent, stairway, steps.
Yeah. So ascend, I guess, yeah, ascend well, you don't have steps at the altar, right? This would be ascending the ramp.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I haven't figured out. So look, we go here. Here it says whole burnt offering, ascend stairway. But when we go here,
It doesn't
there's the definition.
say the whole,
Doesn't.
definition of whole burnt offering.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
So
Well,
let's actually take a look at some of the things that kind of inform our understanding of this.
Okay. Because the Book of Mormon doesn't say much about this at all, this event. I mean,
Yeah.
it says a little bit, but not enough that I think you could take it one way or the other. But let's look at some of the other things you think that we should test.
Yeah, let's take a look at
You said James? Or
Yes.
Hebrew?
There's James and yeah, Hebrews is he's referring to this as into what Abraham did as a sign of his great faith. But let's take a look at James
Okay.
in the faith versus works argument, or faith and works argument, which I think the two are actually really combined. But here we
Right.
go.
They're complementary to each other.
They're complementary to each other. Was not Abraham starting in verse 21, James chapter 2, verse
Which
21.
chapter?
Chapter 2,
Okay.
verse 21.
Okay.
Was not Abraham our father justified by works when he had offered Isaac his son upon the altar? Seest thou how faith wrought with his works, and by works was faith made perfect? The scripture was fulfilled, which saith, Abraham believed God, and it was imputed unto him for righteousness, and he was called the friend of God.
So, just thinking out loud here.
This is actually just a contradiction. And it seems to me that this is a contradiction that Abraham had to face.
So the way that I read this is Abraham, our father, justified by works. I mean, he acted on what he believed, and when he offered Isaac his son upon the altar. So this is not actually stating that God commanded that, but that's what he did, right? And so
But faith brought with his works, and by works was faith made perfect.
right.
That
So one thing though, and I've done this myself, and maybe I'm just trying to justify my theory here, okay? But when God has given me stuff, and I've seen this in my own walk and learning in here from 2014 to now, okay, that I did things wrong when God told me to do something at first. Now, I believe that because I acted on what I thought was right, that it was accounted to me for righteousness, like it was.
now the interesting thing is that God does stop Abraham from actually laying the killing blow.
Right. Now, if Elohim actually told Abraham to do it, would he stop him? Because wouldn't that go against what we talked about earlier? Because that would be a contradicting revelation. Right. Should we go look at that again?
Now let's go back to 22, Genesis.
Well, no, I'm just saying with the same, that God doesn't contradict.
So, yeah.
On what we just happened to talk about earlier, right? How does it be asked known be by a bad angel? By his contradicting a former revelation. So now let's apply this in this instance here. If Yahweh actually did tell Abraham to do the sacrificing of his son, wouldn't the angel coming down telling him to stop be a contradicting?
Right.
And so that's why I'm wondering and believe that Genesis 22 is a bad translation, looking at it. Because if God actually told him to do it and then not to do it, that's a contradicting of former revelation.
He's contradicting his own words, yeah.
Yeah. And when we look at the James verse, right, that you brought out, I don't actually see it stating that God told him.
No, it's just saying that
it's just saying that's what he did.
It's saying
this
that
brings up
he
a
was
question.
justified. He was justified by his works and being obedient to what he thought the command was.
Right, and that's how I'm reading it. So here's a question that we should. I don't know if anybody knows any off the top of their hand. I don't know. If that the only one that I could see is Nephi. He strove to keep the commandments, admitting that he didn't do it always correctly, right? But knowing Nephi at that point, that's I think in 2 Nephi 4, I think I can find it if you want. I believe the works that although Nephi made some mistakes, it was still counted for him for righteousness.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
Actually, here, let me
I'm
pause
on
for
with
a minute.
Stephen.
Okay, go ahead, Charles.
Okay, so I have Joseph Benson's commentary. So he's like kind of late 18th, early 19th, but really late 18th century. He's a Methodist Englishman, but so he'd probably be traditional view, right? So he kind of talks about in his commentary how first he was called out of the land of Chaldees, the land of his fathers, and that was the first test that he did not make an idol. To prove his faith, that he did not make an idol of his own father. And remember the household of his father too. And he had to sacrifice that idol, that whatever vain affections he might have had toward his own household, the household of his own father, he had to sacrifice that. And then
that's an interesting wording on that, because, okay.
And then, well, Benson says, I'm not going to read it because one thing, I have a hard time reading even with glasses, but he says that even after that trial, the refining of his faith had not ended. It continued even to his son, and that this was another test. So basically, this is like a reference to Romans 5, where he talks about the value, where Paul talks about the value of tribulation, that from it we receive hope, and faith, right? And it goes to the same thing Benjamin was saying. So maybe it's the sacrifice that was being commanded here, in the hidden wisdom of the Lord was the sacrificing the idol of his familiar, of his own son, his flesh and blood.
And technically, it's also the idol. It's also the idol of the promise. And it's also the Isaac was the son of the promise.
Sure.
So he
can
had
see
to
that
demonstrate it. So potentially to demonstrate his faith, that the Lord would still fulfill his promise, even if Isaac was taken from him.
Sure, and
it was a sacrifice not of the son, but of an idol. See what I'm saying?
Right. It's that his relationship with his son, what was supposed to be offered on the altar, is what I'm getting from Charles, right?
Yep.
And I can definitely see that, because that would go along with my theory. So maybe I'm being biased, but that makes some sense. Because James verse that we just looked at from Ben, I don't see that it actually states that God told him to do the physical sacrificing. Now, I think what happened was that Abraham was willing to let go of his son, but he went about it the wrong way. Right? Because Abraham wanted a son for a very, very long time. Just like in today's world, a lot of guys want this specific car for a long, long time, and they do everything they can to get that car, and that car is their idol, right? Where perhaps maybe this is going off how Abraham, now that he finally got his son that he wanted for such a long, long, long time, he became his idol. So we can go look at some of the other verses from the New Testament you want to look at, but I think James, I don't think it contradicts my theory.
I don't think it does.
But this is where we need to be Bereans and look at lots of things, and I think that was a good commentary from Charles, right?
Yep.
So, where do you want to go next? Hebrews somewhere?
Hebrews chapter 11.
Okay.
Starting in verse 8.
Yeah, hold on. I don't have the order memorized. 11:8. Okay.
By faith, Abraham, when he was called out into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, obeyed, and he went out, not knowing whither he went. By faith, he sojourned in the land of promise as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he looked for a city which hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Through faith also Sarah herself received strength to conceive seed and was delivered of a child when she was past age, because she judged him faithful who had promised.
So just interesting thing, like last week we read some stuff about marriage where it says pastor flower or something like that, right? I don't remember the exact phrase, I can look at it again, but I would say that's what the past age and past flower is. They're both the same thing, but anyways.
Okay, yeah, exactly. Therefore sprang there even of one, and him as good as dead, so many as the stars of the sky and the multitude, and as the sand which by the seashore innumerable. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, and were persuaded of them, and embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For they that say such things declare plainly that they seek a country. And truly, if they had been mindful of that country from whence they came out, they might have had opportunity to have returned. But now they desire a better country, that is, an heavenly. Therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he hath prepared for them a city. Now, verse 17. By faith, Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac. And he that had received the promises offered up his only begotten son.
Okay, so this one's an important verse right there, right?
Yep.
God tried Abraham. Now, one that you really like pointing out from Mosiah 2 or 3 is how the only way that God tries people is by Torah.
Yep.
And what's the Torah command about the firstborn son? To offer him
And
up.
they would be offered unto the Lord at the temple, not as a burnt offering, but as
Right.
to serve the Lord, to serve Yahweh.
Well, they didn't have a temple, so this was the closest to that. Okay.
Yeah.
But that's offering up their firstborn son, like God commanded.
Yeah, God only tries us through the law.
Right.
And
What's
that's
the law?
That's what the law is, what God inflicts upon us, according
Right. And I'm just going off of your statement from
Mosiah chapter 3:19.
Okay. Anyways, but how does he try us? By the law. And the law in this case, in my opinion, is giving your firstborn son unto him. Meaning he's going to be dedicated in Yahweh's service. And so he's not going to be your son. Right?
Yeah, he is no longer your son.
Right.
Yeah. So, give up his only begotten son, of whom it was said that in Isaac shall all thy seed be called.
Right.
See,
but the thing is here, there's nothing up here about actually killing him in that verse 17, right? God never said to kill him, but I think that's how Abraham.
But to dedicate him.
To dedicate him, but that's how Abraham took it because of the false traditions that he grew up in.
Yeah.
Okay. But it said in Genesis 22, a burnt offering, give him as your son as a burnt offering.
Right,
So
and that's where we were starting to look at the translation. We were starting to look at the translation some, and I think there's some, I would hate to say this, but there's some wiggle room there when we look at the interlinear and the Hebrew meanings of some of the words. But so after we're done looking at some of these New Testament verses, we need to go back to that Genesis 22:2. But I agree, Genesis 22:2, that's like a tongue twister, is a tricky one.
Yep. By faith, let's see. Accounting that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from whence also he received him in a figure.
So 19, I think this is what Abraham was thinking, was going through his mind when this happened. He was trying to put God's ways, or put the pagan ways, and seeing what God's promises are, to how it would work out.
Right. Well, it's talking about, yeah. but I do think that, but this stuff is all the kind, this is the stuff that this is the kind of stuff that I was talking about, is how he, yeah, I don't, it never once here, but you're right, it never once here states specifically that the Lord said that, but we go back to Genesis 22 too, and that's pretty explicit.
Well, in the English translation, I would agree with that. So let's go back to that, right? Because I think the key is Genesis 22:2, right? How to possibly translate that or interpret that, right?
Yep.
This is where I think the interlinear would be helpful, because I'll admit I'm no Hebrew expert. Okay. So and offer him, that's getting off of just right here. Okay. And so this one is definitely an offering. Okay. I can go with that.
To go up, ascend, climb.
Right. So now let's look at the one before it, a burnt offering. Okay. So in Torah, and this is, in fact, this is interesting. So we're looking at this on the subject of law of Moses. Okay. There's a part here in the law of Moses that I'm not sure if it's law of Moses or not. And this right here makes me think it possibly is not. Okay. So there's the animal sacrifice, but there's also the wood offering.
So
for a while, the wood offering is eternal, just like Yeshua's work is eternal, as stated in 2 Nephi 29. And if that's internal, that's Torah, right? And so that could be what this burnt offering is, because that's referred as a burnt offering.
Well,
that wood offering is a burnt offering.
When the oldest son, when the oldest son is dedicated to the Lord, is there a wood offering associated with that?
That's a good question. I don't have an answer, so that's some homework that we should be doing. I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to look into that. Because if there is, that would support my theory, right?
That's right. And if there isn't, then
It doesn't necessarily negate it, but it does make it.
But now we have a problem.
Well, not necessarily, because they could just been gone to go done the burnt offering together, that wood burnt offering together.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Because here, this word for offering, the hymn is not actually in Hebrew, right? That's been added to English. And so this hymn could be, and I'm inclined to think at this point, that is a translator bias.
It's possible.
It's possible, right? I don't know for sure. It's possible. Because this that's not in that word.
No.
That is,
but a whole that word's a whole burnt offering.
Right, but it could be the wood burnt offering.
Could be the wood burnt offering. It could be the ram that the Lord had prepared for them. It could be
sure. But I don't think Yahweh would have told them that there was going to be a ram there, just going off some of the other context in these verses here. Okay.
Yeah, because it was a trial. It was a trial.
Right. I think Yahweh taught him what to do, but it was probably far enough back that maybe Abraham didn't remember, and he went back to his old pagan ways, not knowing any better. But he still was trying to do what Yahweh told him to do, although he did it incorrectly. Kind of like when I look at my history of waking up, I've tried to do things the way that Yahweh Yahweh told me to do, but I made mistakes along those in doing it. But I don't know the best way to put this.
Well, just, I mean, I've experienced fairly similar things, in that as I've tried to be more obedient to the commandments, I didn't always know all the right things to do, or how everything fit together.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went off of the best information that I had. And the Lord, seeing my obedience to the best information that I had, gave me better information.
Right. And I wonder if that's what's going on here. Although there's some, maybe, in my opinion, some bad translations. Okay. Now, here's a question. Can we find of examples in the scriptures that explicitly state that?
Explicitly state
That although your attempts, although were not correct, were counted for you for righteousness. Because one thing that we do have that I think supports my theory is that Yahweh does not contradict his word. And
Right.
if the angel told him to not sacrifice Isaac when Yahweh told him to do it, that's a contradiction.
Right.
So using that logic alone, I think,
And given the
supports
fact
my
that the whole thing is counted to Abraham for righteousness.
well, this is where, can we find other examples where someone was trying to do the right thing, but did it incorrectly, and it was counted for him for righteousness? And if so, that would definitely support my theory. And I don't know one off the top of my head.
I can't think of one straight up.
No, I can't either.
However, as I think about it now, I can see here God giving Abraham better information as the whole thing goes along. The thing is that Abraham was obedient to every word of God throughout this experience.
Where does it say that?
Well, to the best of his understanding.
Oh yeah, okay. So with the best of his understanding, sure. Okay, I'll go with that.
And that is, and that is the fact that God sent an angel indicates that he was stopping Abraham from doing something potentially damning to his soul.
Yeah, I agree, because that would have been murder.
It was an intervention.
Right. I agree.
And so,
it would have been manslaughter. Well, I don't know. That still could have been murder, though, because Isaac didn't do anything to deserve that capital punishment. And even on top of that, that's not how capital punishment is
done.
specified to be done in Torah.
Right. It's actually absolutely against Torah.
Right, it is.
The sacrifice to worship as the pagans do, sacrificing their own children, is against Torah.
Right. And we know from the book of Abraham, that happened to Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is where I think it's going off of his false traditions that maybe he had not fully let go of. But I still think Yahweh told him the right way to do it beforehand. It's just Abraham forgot. Because I don't believe Yahweh would tell him to do something in a way that he had not already instructed him how to do. It's just he forgot.
Have examples of Yahweh giving people on the job training.
Sure. I will agree with that, but So that could apply here. I think it's kind of extreme, but it could apply. But the point that Yahweh teaching him what he should have been done beforehand is not my major point.
Well, no, well, that's
how it
my
was.
point. My point is that what I see here as I read through it and as I read everything else surrounding it, all the commentary, a lot of the commentary in the scriptures themselves surrounding this, Abraham was getting on the job training. He received
I
a
can see
commandment.
that. So maybe wasn't taught before, and
He received a commandment. Okay. Let's be obedient to the Lord. Goes off, and the Lord's like, "Hey, wait a minute."
no, that's not how I said to do it.
Yeah. There's a ram over here. You guys are supposed to come up to the mountain. You were supposed to dedicate your son to me and offer the ram.
Well, I don't think the original commandment included the ram. I think the commandment was that he's mine. You need to offer him to me. And then Abraham,
And then
if it was really completely on job training,
yeah,
would have resetted back to his pagan ways.
that's right. Yeah.
And so I can see that, because whether he was taught the right way before, or if it was on job training, is not the major issue here. It's what was the actual command.
I do think that the actual command was to offer up his son. Obviously, whole burnt offering was a part of it.
And that's
But
I
not
don't know, I'd have to
necessarily that Isaac was supposed to be the burnt offering.
correct. And I think he wasn't supposed to be, but we don't have the actual well, this is where we have a bad English translation of it, right? In my opinion. And
Yeah,
looking at
especially
this,
as you look at the interlinear, you can see there are
how many
some things.
words they're getting off of one, and some of these words could be translator bias.
Some of these words are actually put in there to actually hide Torah. And they're there to hide Torah and to justify the spiritual practices of the spiritual practices of the organizations that were funding the translators.
Yes, I don't know specifically in this case, but in general, I do agree with that statement.
Actually,
do you know for this case?
I do know for a fact, what I do know for a fact is that because it's recorded in the scriptures, that the Israelites did offer their children to Moloch.
When they were in a sinful state.
When they were in a sinful state. So what better way to justify that
than Abraham?
Yep.
That's an interesting point.
But I tend to take a dark view on people generally.
Well, no. Well, I think that's a very valid point that you just made there, though. Right. And so it just kind of put this verse in question, especially considering, because maybe it's more than just translator bias. Maybe it was modified before the translators, right?
Yes,
I do believe is possible, which I think is what you're pointing to. But at the same time, just going off for translator bias, there's the him and as.
I say, yeah.
It could just be do a burnt offering with him.
Yeah.
Right?
On the mountain which I shall tell you of.
Right. But where with, depending what you think the rest of the context or what needs to be done could be taken multiple ways, right?
Yeah. I mean, the words themselves don't specify.
The Hebrew underneath.
Yeah. The Hebrew underlay does not specify that Isaac was supposed to be sacrificed.
I don't believe so. And that's why I wanted to go to the interlinear. Because to me, I'm seeing translator bias.
Well, and I see more than that, but that's just me.
And well, I can see where you're getting with that, but I see that as a possibility, but at the same time, with what's here, I can see how it can be translator bias.
Yeah. Well, and the facts of the matter are, the Catholic Church has also done terrible things to children.
Yes, they still do.
Right. But
Anyways,
the King James translation occurred long ago.
sure, but
So
not everybody in that
so if there's
translation is gonna
translator
be good.
bias, so if there's translator bias in the King James version, it's based on justifying things that were being done then. It's all about when we change the word of God, it is all about justifying our own actions. That is all it is.
Okay. Yeah, I'm following you there. Yeah, I'm following.
It is about justifying our own actions. It's not about, especially when you're talking about something horrific like this that causes people to lose their faith in Yahweh.
Yeah.
And that is the intent and purpose for which it was translated that way.
Sure, and I'll just say it here on the recording. This has been a tricky thing for me, right? If I ever had a shelf, this was on it. I mean, I didn't learn about that terminology until after I left the LDS Church, so it's just kind of funny. But anyways, I have not known what to do with this until a little while ago.
The thing is, but what this does illustrate is that oftentimes, due to the nature of the translations that we have to rely upon prayer and revelation that we receive based upon our knowledge of the law.
Right. And Yahweh doesn't give commands that contradict his law.
No, it does not.
So if that is actually true, he didn't command human sacrifice.
But rather it was a misunderstanding of a commandment that was given.
Correct. And that's what I believe it is.
Mhm.
And I actually do believe Yahweh gave me that.
Yeah.
But I do understand with the current English translation that can be hard to swallow. But as we look at the interlinear, we see how many things that could definitely be translator bias, which
Mhm.
I actually do believe that they are.
Justifying actions that they themselves are taking.
Yeah. So it'd be interesting if we could find some history, some that was going on around that time that would support this translator bias, right? At that
Mhm.
time.
Yeah, so I'll put that's something to do some research into. I don't think this matter is closed as yet. We need to do a little more research, a little more studying up.
Yeah, there's a few things to study out and try to find examples of, but I do think, though, on just the initial look, I do think it still passes the test of testing against the scriptures, personally.
Mhm. Well, I would I mean, I can see that. I can see that as a viable I can see that as a viable understanding. And I just want to make sure that there's an ironclad case.
Oh, right. There's definitely more research to do on the subject.
Yeah.
This is a tricky.
Before I go around saying, "Hey guys, this is what happened here, folks."
Sure. Oh, I understand that. Anyways, I still would be cautious, but at the same time, I actually do believe it.
Yeah.
But I do understand. Be Bereans and test this, and as people have seen here, we've been trying to test this some, right? And we've proposed other things that we need to look into to test it some more.
Absolutely. Well, Stephen, I'm going to have to bid you adios.
Sure. It's probably
Our time must come to an end, sadly.
sure.
I do enjoy our meetings together.
I do enjoy them too. I enjoyed our little fellowship before with the two of us too. That was nice.
Yep.
Um,
Good stuff.
do you want to say anything, Christy, or ask any questions or any thoughts on my idea or inspiration, depending on where you stand on the issue? Anyways, you're muted if you're trying to say something. I guess that's
Okay.
it. I don't hear her say anything. So I guess we'll call it a night. And
Yeah,
thanks
I
for
guess
coming.
so. Well, thank you so much for hosting these, Stephen.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming.
Absolutely.
I enjoy the fellowship and the scripture study together. Yeah.
May we have a few more before the internet falls apart.
Yes. I'm sure we will. Like
Yeah.
in 7 days.
Exactly.
Because now we have our 6 days of work. Anyways.
That's right. That's
All right.
right.
Take care.
All right. Bye.
Oops.